Welcome to session 3. The goal here is that you're going to arrange large swaths of fabric to mimic clothing placement. That's what the goal is. And you're going to assess the color reactions next to the skin when you put those drapes up and down. Watch how the fabric reflects onto the skin. Does it enhance the natural radiance of the complexion, or does it dull the person's complexion and enhance features that you don't want to? Maybe shadowing is not correct or whatever. And then what you do is you take the dark pink that I had, use a light pink, use a cool versus a warm black and a soft dark black. So you're putting together 60 drapes on a client to be able to do a proper professional draping session. And what you're doing with those drapes is you are continually refining the seasonal palettes, narrowing down the set of drapes that you are actually going to be using, moving from broad seasonal categories to nuanced shades for an accurate fine selection. That's what you're going to do. Like I said, there are some limitations to this method. Drapes can be bulky. They're difficult to transport and arrange properly. You have to be very well prepared. I do use them, but I'm super prepared when I do. Like I said, you have to be super prepared when you use the draping method, and you have to be really practiced too. So I'll give you an example of what happens when you're going through a draping session. Just imagine that you have 60 drapes and you're going to determine cool versus warm. So we have our drape here, putting up our warm drape right here. And now you have to put it out, assess. It doesn't look so good. It doesn't look good with my skin tone, really. It's reflecting. You can see the shadowing over here, which is not great. Over here, that copper color is not it's not really good. You can see it reflecting in here and here. So I would do the opposite of that color, and you'd have to know what that color is, the opposite, which is here. That looks a lot better. That has no shadowing there. So you're doing that assessment, cool versus warm. And if the client didn't see that, you'd have to say, could you show me that again? And you'd have to bring it up again and pull it up and be able to pull it down really quickly. See that? Versus that versus this. And you might have to bring up another cool, another warm, another cool, another warm, a couple of combinations. You need to be very good at doing this because you can stumble and bumble around and get confused. When you're confused, you don't look professional. So if you're going to use the draping method, you really need to practice. Also, super, super expensive, like I said, but it yields some really profound. If you get proficient at professional draping, oh my gosh, clients pay a lot of money for somebody who can work capes and drapes, which is what I do. I can use both of them equally well. But if I'm going out to a client's house, I tend not to bring them because it's just too much. And I feel like I'm fumbling and bumbling, and I'm really proficient with the capes and pretty good at doing that. And also remember, part of what I do is I bundle, and the client gets the capes, and they often ask for the drapes, and I don't want to give them this because I know what they're going to do with this. This is called confusion extraordinaire. Even if all of these colors are springtime colors, it's just confusing to the client what to do with them, even if they are in, this is a contrasting color. This is a complementary, and I know that, but the client doesn't. They're not that good yet. So they don't know why all of these shades are placed like this. Those are for professionals. So anyway, those are limitations. Again, let's go over them. They can be bulky. The drapes can be bulky. They can be difficult to transport. They require precise handling to maintain consistency in draping techniques. They tend to be far more expensive than capes. We're talking about anywhere from $2,000 to $5,000 to get a full set of professional capes together. And that is out of the budget of most beginners and even novices. So those are definitely some considerations to think about when you're thinking about capes versus drapes. And then the final method that we're going to talk about is actually using clothing-based draping technique for color analysis. And while it's not as structured as capes and drapes, clothing-based analysis can still offer some really valuable insights, especially if you're using it for personal styling and wardrobe consultations, but you better be good. If you've got an artistic eye, you're well ahead of the pack on this one. If you don't have an artistic eye, you have to train yourself to have an artistic eye. You have to know the difference between a bright yellow, a buttercup yellow, and a lemon yellow, because those are all different seasons. So you have to get really familiar with calling the colors what they are. And then you have to make sure that if you're using color clothing choices, that you have a lot of clothing in those seasons and that you've marked them and tagged them somehow. So if we are using, let me grab these two things again. If we are using a color, the same type of color method here, and we're using the client's clothing, you would have the clothing like this, and you put it up against the client. Let's turn it around. We're giving the fabric. You'd put it up against the client like this, and then you'd find another article of clothing that would be in the opposite and have that at the ready. So you've got to be extremely prepared with this. And this would be your opposite clothing choice. And you'd pull that up against the client's. Now, let me tell you something. Some clients don't like this method at all. They don't like the fact that the clothing is not brand new. So if you are going to use this method, I highly recommend that the clothes smell great and are freshly laundered every single time. And that the client knows that they're freshly laundered and that you haven't been draping it all over other people, because they get skittish. I'm telling you, some people freak out. If you are using the clothing method, a great way to do that is to go to the client's house first and kind of take your cape, grab things out of the person's closet that match the cape, analyze her with the cape, and then use her color choices in tandem. That is the best way to do this ever, because you're literally saying, this is great for you. Look, it's right in your season. And you're putting the cape and then putting the clothing choice. And that makes a client feel really spectacular, because it's their own clothing. It's their own clothing that you're using. And that, to me, is the most impactful. So I highly recommend using the clothing as you're going through this process, if you're in the client's home, which is really pretty cool, a cool method. So how do you use clothing in clothing analysis? Well, you could have the client bring a selection of clothing in different colors to you if you're doing it at your place, and ask them to bring the items that they feel most comfortable and confident in. You can also evaluate patterns that they have, that they gravitate towards, that are in their season, which would be another way to use this. And again, I suggest that if you are using the clothing method, that you combine it with either drapes or capes. Like I said, you can actually evaluate some of the patterned clothing that they have as well, because sometimes they'll gravitate towards colors that aren't solid, but the pattern is more bold in that color and more vibrant in that color, for example, and more predominant in that color that they put next to their face. So they might just gravitate towards the colors that work for them. And a lot of people do, because people have said, oh, you look nice in that color, and they get more of that in their wardrobe, for example. Also use the mirror test. Hold up different clothing items near their face and assess the impact on their skin, their overall vibrancy, and make sure the client's got a mirror in front of them. And then absolutely 100% compare that clothing item, because you're not that good. I'm not that good. You need to be able to balance your own perception, because perception changes. It's a science of color. If you put a green next to a red, your color perception changes. Your contrast perception, your saturation perception changes. So you've got to make sure that you have your set of drapes or capes with you, so that you can do a check on yourself on those clothing pieces. Make sure that you're doing that. Clothing should be used as a supporting method, in my opinion, and not as a standalone approach, ever, because you're going to make a mistake. There are, like we said, there's limitations to everything. The limitations in the clothing is that fabric variations, material, texture, patterns can influence how a color appears. And this method does lack the structure and the standardization of either professional set of capes or a professional set of drapes. So you have to be aware of that. I think that one of the most important things you're doing, whether you're using clothing or capes or drapes, is that you have to understand that there are 4 critical questions that I ask, and I think you should ask during color analysis, regardless of which method that you use. Always make sure that you're asking these 4 critical questions to ensure accuracy yourself. You say, does the client's skin, their complexion, appear more radiant and even? Number 1, does it? The right colors actually create a glowing type of effect without highlighting imperfections. So that's what you're looking for. Again, first question, does the client's skin appear more radiant and even? Write it down, copy it. It's in the course, it's in the book. Second question is, do their eyes look brighter and more defined? The correct seasonal palette enhances the natural clarity and intensity of the eyes. That's what you're looking for. So that question again is, write it down. Do their eyes look brighter and more defined? Do they? With those colors draped around them. The third question, does a client look healthy and well rested? Certain colors can make a person appear more youthful, while others may create a dull or very tired or older looking effect. It makes them look grayer, which is not desirable. It can make them look ashy if you have more melanin in your skin. It's not good. So that question is, write it down. Does the client look healthy and well rested? Next question, number 4. Are there any unwanted shadows? You saw the shadows earlier on in my face, 2 different colors, one shadowed, one didn't. Are there any unwanted shadows or discoloration that are popping or are more apparent because of the colors that you're draping around the face? The wrong colors can highlight dark circles, redness, or uneven skin tone. So again, that question is, are there any unwanted shadows or discoloration? Those 4 questions. Does the client's skin appear more radiant and even? Do their eyes look brighter and more defined? Does the client look healthy and well rested? Are there any unwelcome shadows or discoloration? That's it. So we talk about the final thoughts and best practices. Well, in this session, you'll have a comprehensive understanding of how to conduct professional color analysis using capes, drapes, or clothing. Watch the associated videos in this session. And while all of these methods have value, my personal preference, of course, is the Colormepowerful seasonal capes. I am prejudiced, I admit it, and I reckon that if you're a beginner or a novice, it's going to be the easiest for you to learn. And then you use that with the client's clothing. Do it in tandem. You're going to look like a rock star.